I am Mazi KK Odeluga.
Mazi Ejikeme Obasi.
Na Mazi Oke Okachukwu.
This is Straight Talk Radio, the world as we see.
Coming to you from WGHC 98.3 FM. Your voice, your music, your station.
Listen to us this and every Saturday at 4 to 5 p.m. U.S. Central, and this and every Tuesday at 9 to 10 p.m. U.S. Central.
Ndewono.
Hello, thanks for joining us on Straight Talk Radio on WGHC 98.3 FM. Your voice, your music, your station. We are glad to have another time with you, and you are listening to Mazi Oke Okachukwu.
Mazi Ejikeme Obasi.
And our other co-host will join us shortly. Our program is a news program from an Igbo perspective, especially from the diasporan angle. And our objectives are to help you think through some of the items that we hear on the news, and also to give you our opinions on events that happen around the world. We hope that our thoughts will help crystallize what you're thinking, and also help you think about it some more and maybe put some action to it so that we could make some changes. If you would like to join us on the radio, you could call us at 773-942-7167. Today we're going to continue our conversation on Nigeria 48 years after the end of conflict officially. And we talked the last two shows. The first was what was the conflict about, what precipitated it, and how was it prosecuted. And the last show we talked about the missed opportunities that happened. And today we're going to continue the conversation talking about one of those missed opportunities. And we are going to focus specifically on Aburi Accord. Aburi is a place in Ghana that the Nigerian side and the Biafran side got together on before the beginning of the war, and had some agreement that everybody hoped was going to stop the conflict in its early stages and reconcile the nation. That didn't quite happen. So today we're going to look at what are those things that were agreed to, and what are the missed opportunities that are there, and what lessons do we derive from that. So before we start, I want to give a shout out to our audience on Facebook Live and those that have been visiting our page on Facebook. We have a Straight Talk Radio page on Facebook, or you could go to our group Straight Talk to You Radio and share your comments. But we would like to get your comments on the live show, or you could call us, like I said, on number 773-942-7167. And I'll hand it over to my co-host to share some comments. Go ahead, Dr. Mazi Obasi.
I think, one of the reasons we decided to spend a whole hour talking about the Aburi Accord is that this is an occasion when Nigerians came together essentially without any foreign influence to look at problems that were facing the nation at a very critical time in the history. And they came up with solutions that, looking back 48 years later, have remained very relevant. Putting things in perspective, this is after the first military coup, where a group of young officers essentially assassinated the leadership from northern Nigeria, western Nigeria, and midwestern Nigeria, which was followed a few months later by a bloody counter coup, where the head of the Supreme Military Council from eastern Nigeria and his host at that time from western Nigeria were assassinated, and widespread violence directed against Easterners, mostly drawn from the then Eastern region and the Midwest region, and resulted in a large refugee crisis in that a lot of Nigerians were displaced from their place of residence back to their zones of traditional origin. And there was a lot of suspicion, there was a lot of angst, and the country was really tottering. It was at that time that these military officers were hosted by the Supreme Military Council in Ghana, at that time led by Major General Ankra, and there were the members of that council were drawn from each of the the four zones: the East, the West, the Midwest, and the North, as well as their secretaries, and they were left alone to map out a way forward for Nigeria.
So how did the idea of the conference come about? Do we know why, or who suggested it, or why we decided that Ghana was going to be the place to go have the talk?
I believe it was at the behest of the Ghanaians. Because at that time, if you will recall, there had been pogroms meted out against Easterners mostly that lived in northern Nigeria, and more than 30,000 civilians of Eastern origin had been killed, maimed, and the country was in very bad shape, and the military leaders could not agree.
Yes, and to put it in context, the military head of state then was Agui Ironsi.
Yes.
Somebody from the East.
Yes.
So the military leaders couldn't agree. It wasn't. So we're not saying that it was all done by the North trying to kill all the Easterners in the government part. Yes, Easterners were being killed in the northern area, but the government of the time couldn't agree on how to be able to save them.
Yes, that is true.
So the governor on the eastern part of the country decided that he was going to have a safe area so that people from the east who made it back home within the safe area will be, kind of have some guarantee that nobody's chasing them all the way back to their houses.
Yes, let me also point out to you that a similar thing happened in the Midwest, because at that time, large parts of the then Midwest region, they were considered Easterners, and they also were involved in the large-scale pogroms that were inflicted in northern Nigeria. Yes.
So, and then how did we get the conflict to exacerbate? So we were in one country. A governor in the east got an area that he says, if you cross this line and you get here, you're safe. And the central government is not able to handle this thing they called a riot, but was much more a pogrom, genocide going on.
Yes.
And how did we get to the point where we said, well, what made us think we need some conflict resolution?
Well, at that time, to put it in context, the counter coup was designed to remove Easterners from the hierarchy in the army.
So not only were Easterners being killed in the northern parts and the western part of the country, now there's a counter coup that wiped out the part of the leadership that were from the East.
Yes, the counter coup itself was directed at military officers.
Yes.
But beyond the counter coup, there was a large-scale uprising by quote-unquote civilians, which in reality was not true.
Right.
Because there is ample evidence of participation by the armed forces, especially the army,
right,
in directing and participating in civilian massacres in northern Nigeria. So the bottom line was Easterners fled, Easterners that lived in the north and the western region fled back to their homeland in unprecedented numbers. Yes.
And now that the leadership that was from the East is also wiped out, so the people from the Easterners are feeling like we have no part in what's going on. We're being killed. And the people that we're trying to defend us, they've actually decided to take off anybody that looks like me that will probably give a voice. So it seemed like it was a government effort trying to get rid of the Easterners.
Yes, well, to keep the story straight and in fairness, I will point out that the civilian leadership of Eastern Nigeria remained essentially intact.
Right.
So the political leadership was not affected, although it has been made clear that that was an accident of history and really not by design.
Right.
Because the first coup was supposed to remove the political leadership across all the regions.
Yes.
The failure to successfully execute it in eastern Nigeria spared the eastern Nigerian political leadership, which I have on an earlier program made clear that, in my opinion, it would have been better for Ndibo if the political leadership in eastern Nigeria had been removed with the rest of them.
And shout out to Francis Godwin, who's watching us from Rome, Italy on Facebook. We hear you, and we would like you to be part of the program. So if you have any comments, if you have any suggestions, any part of the conversation you want to join in, you could join in on Facebook. And if you're on your phone, you could actually download the WGHC app from the Apple Store. Or if you have an Android, you could use the TuneIn app to listen to us live and join and be part of the conversation. Once again, you're listening to Straight Talk Radio on WGHC 98.3 FM, your voice, your music, your station. And we are continuing our discussion on Nigeria 48 years after the end of conflict. And today we are looking specifically on, we are going to get to it shortly, but we're trying to look specifically at the solutions that was tried to try to avoid the conflict, and we are looking at the one that happened at Aburi, Ghana, the Aburi Accord. And we would like to take this opportunity to welcome our other co-host, Mazi Odeluga, to the program. Mazi Odeluga.
David.
So we've talked, we kind of helped you get to the same point as us. So the last few shows we talked about the conflict, what happened before the conflict, the coup, the counter coup. Today we're talking about the solution. So we have gotten to the counter coup, and a lot of people, military officers on the east that were part of the leadership were killed. The Easterners were being killed on the western side of the country, mostly on the northern side, and were being driven home because there's a safe location for them created by the then governor of the east, Lieutenant Colonel Odumeju Ojukwu. Yes. And now, at some point, after it seemed like the government wasn't going to be able to help, the Easterners decided, all right, we don't want any part in this government, to your home, O Israel.
It hadn't gotten there yet, if I may just, it had not gotten there yet. What had happened was that the military commander of the East, the commander of the Eastern region, Colonel Odumeju Ojukwu, basically had said that the safety of Easterners in Nigeria could not be guaranteed, and he provided a safe zone from them and asked the other tribes, Northerners mostly, to go home. Yes, Mazi Odeluga, you wanted to say something.
Yes, and the other part of this whole conversation is that you remember that following the January 66 coup, that there was a genocidal attack that was unleashed on the Easterners, mainly the Igbo living in the northern part of Nigeria, that started in May 29, 1966. And shortly after that, Lieutenant Colonel Odumeju Ojukwu, who was the military governor of the Eastern region, did encourage all Easterners to go back to the north, having received assurances from the military leader Hassan of Katsina in Enugu, in Kaduna, that the Easterners are safe. And he even went ahead to show magnanimity and the fact that, like the Igbo believes that so he even went as far as appointing the then emir of Kano, Adebayo, as the chancellor of University of Nigeria, Nsukka, and invited him to come to the graduation for his own installation. Now, Then came July 29, 1966. Again, Easterners are slaughtered as mainly Igbos. And so that created the crisis that actually made Lieutenant Colonel Ojukwu take a seat back, because here he was preaching peace, peacemaker, and now it's like everything he said was everybody renegated on it. So when July 29 happened, and nobody could tell him where Agui Ironsi was, the commander-in-chief, the supreme commander of the army, he basically said, I'm not going to accept Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Gowon as the new head of government until, one, they will declare what happened to General Agui Ironsi.
So let me do a little bit of an interpretation,
Yes.
right? So Easterners were being killed, and they're appealing to the country, including the North, to stop the violence. And the governor on the eastern part decided, look, I'll show you that these people are peace-loving, and they will. So he encouraged people to go back, did a goodwill gesture to people from the North, and got guarantees from people from the North.
That's right.
That this is all over, big misunderstanding, this is going to stop. And then a coup happens.
Yes.
That wiped out the leadership that we're appealing to actually get to help. And actually, it's the leadership of people from the East, didn't touch anybody from the North.
That's right.
And he, being a part of the military ruling council, the Supreme Military Council.
That's right.
Because he's a governor, wanted to understand, where are we? I mean, so some part of the military is missing.
That's right.
Some part of the leadership is missing, especially the head of state. And now you are trying to tell me that somebody is in charge, but I don't know where the head of state is.
That's right. Because part of his argument was that given the military chain of command, that it was actually Adebayo, I think it was Brigadier Adebayo, that was supposed to take over.
Right.
And that Gowon was not the next in line to take over from Agui Ironsi. So first of all, he was saying there's a break in the chain of command. Two, if the announcement is that Fajui and General Agui Ironsi had been kidnapped,
Right. You can't just replace
you can't replace them until we know their whereabouts. The state should be looking for their supreme commander.
There is a succession. Somebody should stand in place
Yes.
until we find them. And the person that should stand in place is not the guy you're telling me.
And it's not
It should be next in command,
that's right.
being a military structure.
That's right. And then two, so that was part of his issues. And so he raised this as a military officer and wanted responses from Lagos. And so Gowon was flexing his muscles that, look, I'm the new boss in town and you better listen to me. And then he's like, I can't really listen to you because you've not told me where my commander is and you're not the last in chain of command. Then there were other issues, though,
Right.
for the East, because now you have
lot of
thousands of internally displaced Easterners, federal civil servants, people who came back from all over Nigeria, not just the North, because there were killings of Igbo officers in Ibadan and Igbo civilians in Lagos, Ibadan, and parts of the Middle Belt.
A lot of the Middle Belt.
So there was great insecurity among the Igbo, and so Ojukwu refused to go to Lagos for any meeting.
So now we are back to where we are trying to get. So
set the
our
stage.
neighbors in Ghana sees this conflict happening to their neighbors, and Abatobi Onye.
That's right.
So they want to step in and help resolve this brotherly conflict. I remember that Muammar Gaddafi said about the problem in Sudan that it's some disagreement about a goat, that Africans should be able to fix it. So I'm guessing in that same spirit, Ghanaians are looking at this and going, this is some brotherly conflict. We are going to be able to get our brothers on the table and fix it. So they call this meeting.
Yes.
All right. So
Okay, I would like to actually set the stage before we go into the nitty-gritty of the discussion. I encourage everybody who is listening to this program, try and go and read for yourself the minutes of the Aburi meeting. And we are going to post it on our Facebook page. If you don't know where to get it, go to our Facebook page, Straight Talk to You, and you will it will be made available to you. The reason this becomes important is the preamble that Major General Ankra, in his introductory speech, made a very astute observation. He said, this is a meeting of military men.
Yes.
It is not politics. And he was happy that politicians were not involved in this meeting, because he felt that as all of them in that room were military men, that you could
DNA.
Absolutely, and you would eschew petty politics to find a proper solution for Nigeria.
Mazi Obasi,
Yes.
I think it would be instructive if I could read that statement.
Okay.
Please do.
Yes.
It says, the chairman of the Ghana National Liberation Council, Lieutenant General J.A. Ankra, declaring the meeting open, welcomed the visitors to Ghana and expressed delight that Ghana have been agreed upon by the Nigerian military leaders as the venue for this crucial meeting. He considered the whole matter to be the domestic affair of Nigeria, and as such, he refrained from dwelling on any specific points. The general, however, expressed the belief that the Nigerian problems were not such that cannot be easily resolved through patience, understanding, and mutual respect. Throughout history, he said, there has been no failure of military statesmen, and the eyes of the whole world were on the Nigerian army. He advised that soldiers are purely statesmen and not politicians, and that the Nigerian military leaders owe it as a responsibility to the 56 million people of Nigeria to successfully carry through their task of nation building. Concluding, the general urged the Nigerian leaders to bury their differences, forget the past, and discuss their matter frankly but patiently.
I picked up a few things from that. One, he said, just waiting and so that the problem will solve itself or go away, it's not an option.
Yes.
That's right.
It requires people sitting down and having a dialogue.
That's right.
And he thinks it's something that could be done, especially with military guys who have discipline in their DNA, who could not get into the petty politics, but actually go through the points and get to a solution right away.
That was his assumption. Knowing the training and the character of military leadership. So he had great hopes. Again, we should go back, because the role Ghana has played in the affairs of Nigeria is historic. Remember that some of the first resistance to British colonial rule in Nigeria started from Ghana.
Yes.
With the great Nnamdi Azikiwe arriving from the U.S. with his fellow alum
Kwame.
from Lincoln University, Kwame Nkrumah,
Yes.
and then establishing the West African Pilot. He was in Ghana, from where he began to pen some of those writings and criticisms of the British rule that actually began to stir up a nationalism within the peoples of then colonial Nigeria to rise up and seek independence. So Ghana has always been a seedbed, a place of refuge, a place of organizing, a place of vision for Nigeria. And so coming back to Aburi to have a conversation about Nigeria is not out of place. Again, an African solution to an African problem.
I was going to get to that. It's an African solution and why that makes such a big difference is I saw Mbeki lamenting on a video about Africans waiting on their problems, whether it's finance or it's political or it's
security,
conflict.
Whatever. Yeah.
They wait till Westerners, maybe in Europe somewhere or in the US somewhere, United Nations or some organization in Europe, calls a meeting of African leaders. And then they mosey up there, and then they go out there and then have a tour of whatever city they're going to, sit together in a round table and listen to people who are not Africans, tell them what their problems are and what the solutions should be. They get their gift bags, and then they go home and the problem continues. So this is a an example. There are other examples, but this
That's
is
right.
one example when, without any foreigners, this is brotherly Africans getting together to say, we have a problem. And Ghana saying, although this problem is not affecting me right now as a country, myself, but these are my people, and I would like you guys to sit down and solve your problems because we know you could.
The other part that needs to be said here is that we have to recognize that Ghana and Nigeria traditionally, these are the English-speaking West African countries that are close to each other. The military, especially, they go to the same military schools. There was the military school in Ghana. There was Sandhurst, and a lot of cadet training. Ghanaians and Nigerians participated together, so they were known to each other at that level. So this truly was a brotherly meeting. But if we can now, go into the meat of the meeting, because so we can have enough time to really discuss this.
I know, but before we go, I want to acknowledge some of our some of the people on Facebook. So I see Nnamdi Chuks-Onwekelu, I see Chukwudi Favor Koronkwo, I see Manuel Nwankwo, I see Francis Godwin, I see a lot of people, Henry Nwachuku. Thanks for joining us. And also, I want to mention that Chukwudi Favor Koronkwo is saying that there's been enough talking. That what we need now are plans to protect our land, and I'm guessing by our land, you're meaning the eastern part of Nigeria, and that the mandate to every state is to provide a cattle colony. And I want to take a detour just to talk about that news, right? So there are a few news. We know we live in the U.S. and our president went to Davos and came back. We thank God that he went successfully and came back successfully. We know there are other conversations happening, but in Nigeria, the thing that keeps happening every so often is this thing about the Fulani cattle herdsmen. That's what it's called. I think they are terrorists with cattle as a cover, and people usually call it a herdsman-farmer conflict. And if somebody says that I had a fight with you, but each time there is a fight, I'm the one crying and the one beat up, and you don't have any marks on you, it's not a fight, it's a beat down. So I don't think it's a herdsman-farmers conflict. I think it's a herdsman massacre of people in their communities. What do you guys see?
Yeah, first of all, it's good Chedu raised it, but this is part of the problem.
Yes.
We have this fire brigade attitude towards issues. We don't kind of dig deep into history to find solutions.
Yes.
So to him, if I need a boom katakana, but talk. Mana, as you know, onye amare ebe no niozu. That's one. Two, now onye amaro mbe mmiri bido mabia mama mbokolia. So if all Fulutata as the Fulani herdsmen crisis
existed before in some other shape or form.
This is not new.
Yes. That's
right. You see, we have been dealing with this ever since ever since the 50s.
Yes.
And so it's nothing new. It's kind of like same problem, same issue with different strategies. So it is important that the younger generation understand these issues, because it's not something that you have to wave a word and there's a solution. No, mbana. That's now maro ife bulunia. Ife melonia me. So ana ekwifu ufodo umuaka gente.
Yes.
Because history is critical. History is the story about your life and how that impacted your life.
And then that's what it was. Those who don't know their history.
I have to repeat.
Because part of what we're talking about, really, especially this idea of having conversations among Africans, is important. At the Berlin Conference, there was no African when Africa was divided. It has continued to happen. And so it's up to our new generation to understand that we have to take hold of our story.
Yes.
And so if the Fulani so-called Fulani herdsmen,
yes,
Igbo agba izu.
Well, yes.
And that's it.
Okay.
There's nothing else to have a conversation about. But
To support- to
you
support-
have leaders
To
in
support
Oka.
Onyenekwu. So those leaders have been there, and this keeps happening with the same leaders. in
Una
place.
agbakpọ izu.
Mana Governor Ekiti, echeho ka ọgbawa izu.
No.
Nyanwa bụ the executive of the state. Nyanwa ka ewusi onye nwakwa na nwa kpọrọ atụrụ na efi bata na be.
Nuchem,
Yes.
what KK is trying to say
Yes.
is not at all different from what you're trying to say. Maka KK si ka agbakpọ ha izu. Igbu izu. If si na gị na mmadụ na-agba izu, it presupposes na onye gị na ya na-agba izu
Again.
na gị na-ekwu.
Yes.
Gị na onye iro gị anaghị agba izu.
No.
So ọ bụrụ na onye i were tinye n'ọchịchị si na ya na-anọchi anya gị bụ onye oshi bụ oke
Yes.
gị meghere ihe ngịga
Okay.
mgbe ị gara ịhụ ha azụ
Okay, no.
gị na chi gị absolutely
Yes.
igbu izu a na-ekwu okwu ya. And I'm sorry this is taking us away from the thrust of the discussion, which we will get back to. But
Yes.
the reality is, Onya say, get to the action. I tell you, the first action you need to do, go and find people who represent Igbo interests. Go and look at the Aburi Accord. Go and look at Ojukwu's position. Ịgụcha ihe Ojukwu kwuru, ihe wụ mkpa ya, ihe ọ gara Aburi ịzọrọ ndị Igbo, gị jụzie onwe gị, where was his loyalty?
Yes.
Because that is the
I
question.
I like that you said that because I want to actually just give a slight profile of Ojukwu.
Okay.
This guy is the first son, and if you're an Igbo man, you know what that means. This is Diokbara, the first African millionaire, who will be a billionaire if we brought the money forward today. His father has so many industries, has so much money that Ojukwu si na ya ga-abanye amị, which wasn't what of that. Ọchọ onye ga-anọchi ya, dịka Diokbara mmadụ. Papi Aju, that when the guy went forward to do it, he actually made sure that he didn't go in as a ranking officer. So, Andoraka, Obu non tata, Agom news na-ekwu na nwa Buhari, Walopatiko or something.
Yeah.
I am a refe nwa na-alụ, mana enwe ego na ọ na-eri.
Yes.
That wasn't the life that this guy had. But Obu na-ekwube tata, Ojukwu was the son of a billionaire.
Yep.
Such that if he wanted to buy the conference or if he wanted to buy Nigeria, or not enough would have stopped him.
No, he wouldn't have even had interest in the modern construct, the way
He will be
our
li-
people
he will
are
be
raised.
living- he will be
Don't-
living abroad
He will
and
be
living the
living
high
in
life.
Switzerland.
Yes. Yes.
He will not be dealing with this nitty-gritty of, what is the problem the
I
Igbo had.
want to expand on Ihoku because that shows the heart that we need in our leaders.
Yes.
That it has to
Yes.
be the heart that has concerns for a
Ndị
larger
ọ
community.
na-achị.
Not
Yes.
just
Yes.
because Nagua no kwala ọfụma.
Yes, and then in all this, I want the Igbo to get back to being Igbo. And what does that mean?
Yes.
As na na-agbakpọ dike izu.
Yes.
O nwere ife bụ izu.
O nwere onye a na-akpọ dike a na-agbala izu n'ụzọ isi.
And nwere ife bụ izu. Izu is when our people will gather together in a caucus. And at the end of it all, you will not know who said what in that caucus.
If I na-achọ consensus.
What you will hear is either a consensus, and following the consensus, if you remember,
A decision.
Edit. Yes.
and if you do not agree with the issue, you have a right to secede, to move separate. There's no opposition to
Either
issue.
you separate or we separate you.
Yeah, but no matches.
Yes.
So going back to this issue that is facing Igbo security, Igbo homeland security, if the governors are the chief security officer, also osisi ka agwa na aga egbu ọbịakakwuru,
Agha amala ọkụ ya ha eri ngwọrọ.
okay, aga akala aka ada eli ngwọrọ mana ụkpana okpoko gburu.
Auntie.
So if the governor does not know what to do,
Yes.
let the people gbali izu so that ka agwa governor.
Ọ bụrụ
If
sọ
ọ ga-eme.
gọvanọ, enwere gọvanọ,
no,
enwere
but,
representatives, enwere ma ndị kọmishọna ọrụ pụtara.
If I may say something, because
Yes.
every year, Mazi Odeluga kwuru tọrọ m ọchị.
Yes.
Odelugasị ọkpa na okpoko gburu ntị chiri ya.
Yes.
So ajụjụ m na-ajụ ugbu a, ele onye wụ ọkpa na ahụ?
That's
Yes.
right.
Ele onye ọwụ?
Ị
Ị ga-anọ a na-asị we must fight, we must this, we must that. Ịhụla ndị ji gị n'ala. Ịhụla ndị ji gị n'ala.
Yes.
Ha bịa ha koro konkosa sị gị I'm representing the people. Ere gị rie ego. Echi gị tụtụrụkwa ha tinye ha n'ọchịchị.
Onye ahụ ụkpana wee nọzienụ n'ọkụ si ndị mmadụ na ha na-ene ka o si agba
Ka ọ
mmanụ.
na-aha mmanụ.
No, ọ na-agwa ya atị na akpa nọ n'ọkụ.
Yes.
A na-asị ya nwoke na ị nọ n'ọkụ sị na ya na-esi ụtọ.
Yes.
You see, those are some of the issues. Because our people have all these convoluted ways about how do we resolve our issues. We already have a structure.
All right, we'll get back to Aburi. So
Yes.
we are now back at Aburi. Sorry for the Dalo Mazi Chukuma.
Yes.
So at Aburi, we know how the conference was started. We have the settings from Ghana, and now the discussion starts. So
Yes. So basically, ile ihe akpara, the discussions that were held in Aburi,
yes,
the agreements in Aburi
yes,
are on the table today in Nigeria under the umbrella of either restructuring or separation.
yes,
So it goes back to the last radio show that we said, what are the lessons learned?
Learned.
It is a shame that everything that was agreed in Aburi and reneged on 48 years later are right back on the table. So the point is, let us go through what was agreed on in Aburi and very quickly say, are they germane or not?
So so we did the opening.
Okay.
And then the first, I'll go through it by head.
Sure,
There are a few
sure,
other things that
sure,
happened with the opening,
sure.
but I'll say the first thing that was discussed was the importation of arms and the unification of the armed forces, if you will.
Yeah.
That was something that was on the table because Ojukwu was still saying the chain of command is not followed, but also he was suspicious because while this conflict is going on, while the head of state is missing, he has heard report, he said, of people of Nigeria importing arms. So he's thinking it's not enough that you're killing all these people and moving them home and all this conflict is going on. Why do we need more arms? So,
Mazio Deloga, you want to say
Yes.
something about
You know,
that?
why that is important to Ojukwu was one, it's fact that the May 66, 2966, the July 29, 1966, and the September 29, 1966 genocidal attacks against the Easterners, mainly the Igbo, in the northern part of Nigeria and other parts of Nigeria, were actually organized and conducted by the state. The army was actually involved in the killing of the Easterners. And so that created an issue for him. Now, when he saw that Nigeria had already begun to amass arms, he raised the question. Because now he realized that there was only one target as at that point in Nigeria, and that was the Igbo. And so he raised it he put it on the table to ask Lagos, Gowon, to explain what was going on. And so it's interesting what Gowon said.
yes,
Or before then, there was an accusation levied against the East,
Yes.
that Ojukwu was also apporting arms, and there was an airplane crash in Cameroon that purportedly was carrying ammunition for the Eastern region.
yes,
And as at this point, it's important for us to also state the fact that the Eastern region was already under the federal blockade. So meaning the ports have already been blocked, the air corridor had been blocked, the land corridor has been blocked.
So if you were looking at it from the other side,
Yes.
right? your civilians from your neck of the woods are being killed.
That's right.
The military seems to have gotten rid of any leadership that has to do with people from the neck of the woods.
Yes.
And you are under blockade.
Yep.
I mean,
And then they are
if he walks like a duck, quacks like a duck.
Yes.
Is it a goose?
So Ojukwu said Lieutenant Colonel Ojukwu denied both allegations.
Yes.
Meaning about
That
the
he was
importation
also
that was
importing arms.
concluding his remarks on arms buildup. Lieutenant Colonel Ojukwu proposed that if the meeting was to make any progress, all the members must at the outset adopt a resolution to renounce the use of force in the settlement of Nigerian dispute. That was his position.
So this is a non-violent. The conflict can be resolved on the table.
Let us remove any option of violence.
Let's not think that we're going to fight. Let's
That's
start
right.
with as brothers.
So because again, there are people who will argue that the eastern region that later became Biafra was gearing up for a fight. That was not the disposition of Ojukwu. Neither was that the posture of the Igbo. The Igbo was actually at that point licking her wound and burying the many people. There was no family in Igbo land that did not lose somebody or had somebody injured in northern Nigeria. And so it was a time of great mourning and distress for the eastern region.
So as we talk about, because I think as we go through each point, it's good to bring it to current events.
Yes.
To tie these things together.
1 second.
Sure.
You are listening to Straight Talk Radio on WGHC 98.3 FM, your voice, your music, your station. Go ahead.
Yes. If you look at what is going on in Nigeria today, you have very well armed terrorists that are calling themselves Fulani herdsmen.
Yes.
That are able to strike at any community they feel like with impunity.
Yes.
Somehow or the other, the state actors, the police, the army, are never around to safeguard life and property.
But the law enforcement people are there after they are gone, and they end up arresting people who are expressing their dissatisfaction of whatever event that happened.
I think they are there to
Protect.
prevent reprisals.
Yes.
So now you hear stories about arms being imported illegally all over the place. So in many ways, you are right back to
where we started
in Aburi. Why is there no discussion about a blanket ban on importation of arms?
Or when did AK-47 become a shepherding tool?
Yes.
So if we need to have an honest discussion, those so-called Fulanese herdmen must, and I mean must, disarm. There is no reason to have any weapons while you're trying to shepherd cows. What do you think, Mazio Delga?
That's right. I mean, Nigeria has become so militarized, and indeed, and to be factual, it's only the Igbo that is not militarized. So again, we come back to 66, where we're sitting duck.
Yes.
The North is armed.
So are we taking the posture that to continue this conversation and this living together in a community called Nigeria, that we will all have to lay down our arms? Or are we saying that Igbo people should just start like everybody else and start arming themselves?
That's right.
Okay.
You got to go?
Yes.
Because my point being that, yes, the military should have control. The government should have control over security. But we have seen that they don't. And it goes back to what was going on in 66.
So we will breeze through. So we talked about the arms, and I want to get to the resolution about the arms, because they eventually arrived at a resolution after all these conversations.
Yes.
About who was importing what. And Gowon did explain that Nigeria was importing arms, but it was already I mean, it was something that was already scheduled. The arms is coming, is going to get to everybody, including the East.
Yeah, but
they got to a resolution eventually.
Yes, they do. They did get to a resolution.
Yes.
But I would like to point out what my good friend, Lieutenant Yakubu Gowon, because if there is anybody that is still alive today within that Nigerian space who has the ability and in whose hands, really, literally, the destiny of that land is in his hands, is Yakubu Gowon. Because he's one of the only survivors of the only one of the people who were at Aburi that is still alive and knew what happened, exactly what was said, and now some of his own people are facing the same issues that the Eastern region faced in 66. If he's a man of truth, he should come out.
Yes.
If he can speak the truth, that will actually set Nigeria free. And so, to answer your question,
yes,
Gowon agreed
yes.
that the Nigerian government was importing arms. The interesting thing that he said was that instead of storing it in Lagos, it is being sent to Kaduna because there are no storage facilities in Lagos. So there were no warehouses in Lagos.
Yes.
And if you are going to defend a country, you send your munition to the interior.
Right.
Instead of at the coast, where most likely you're going to have.
It's Nigeria. We have border patrol inside Enugu.
But one of the things that they agreed on was one, to renounce the use of force as a means of settling the Nigerian crisis, reaffirm their faith in discussions and negotiation as the only peaceful way of resolving the Nigerian crisis.
Yes.
And agree to exchange information on the quantity of arms and ammunition available in each unit of the army in each region and the unallocated stores, and to share out such arms equitably to the various commands. Agree that there should be no more importation of arms and ammunition until normalcy was restored. So immediately the class of 66 said, we're not going to
import anymore.
We're not just import. We are not going to resolve this crisis by sheer force.
By fighting.
We are going to have conversations.
Yes.
We're going to have discussions, and we're going to continue to have discussions.
I think. I mean, I'm sitting on the other side as a shopkeeper who's trying to sell his goods, and by that I mean there were some interests who were not part of this conversation who will look at this and go, "You're not importing any arms. How am I going to get my money?" Right. So there are people that are not at the table who are being disenfranchised by this resolution right away.
Yes.
Before we continue, I would like to mention that we are on WGHC 98.3 FM radio. This is a non-for-profit organization that actually brings this program to you, and our program is on this and every Saturday, 4 to 5 p.m., and this and every Tuesday, 9 to 10 p.m. And you could donate to help this organization. It's a not-for-profit. You could donate as little as you have. You could donate even $1 today. Go to www.wghcfm.org and donate at our website. Thank you for your donation. And we're continuing the conversation. So these are the resolutions that we have. We're not going to fight. We are going to settle this at the table, and we are not going to bring in any more things that will escalate this situation. We're not going to add more fuel to the fire, so to speak.
Yes.
All right. Then the conversation went to the Supreme Military Council. Mazi Obasi.
Yes. Well, when it got to, in terms of governance, really,
Yes.
I think it was agreed on that power would again devolve back to the regions. In fact, they agreed in Aburi that they would abrogate all of the decrees that took away power from the regions and centralized it. That was one of the things they agreed to.
The January 15th, 1966 coup happened, and the military took over from the politicians.
Yes.
And one of the first things they did was to get rid of the politicians and actually concentrate all the powers
in the center.
Yes. Before, there were regional powers given to the 4 regions that existed. So by this agreement, that means that we are not going to be centralized anymore. We're going to some kind of federalism again.
Yes. And they also agreed on a Supreme Military Council where the leadership would be drawn from each of the old regions, again still under the military, but the military governors of the regions.
But on the way
Yes.
to that agreement, there was a conversation about Ojukwu came in with this position that Gowon is not supposed to be the guy. His head of state, who has been kidnapped, hasn't been found, and the guy that was supposed to be in command the guy that's supposed to succeed him is kind of put to the side. So they had that conversation.
Yes, but what had happened was that following that conversation,
Yes.
there was a meeting off camera. And at that off camera meeting, I think that was where it was admitted that the two of them had actually been murdered.
They've been killed.
Yes.
They knew.
So there was an official admission, though it did not make it to the records.
Yes.
But reading between the lines. But if I may take a step back,
Yes.
ndị Igbo si na anaghị amụ aka ekpe na nka.
No.
So, Mazi Odeluga, this is actually for you. Anybody, in my opinion, Neche ka Gowon putakwu eziokwu, I think that's a waste of time.
It's like asking Donald Trump to apologize.
It is a waste of time. He has proved himself to be a man of very poor character. A man who cannot accept guilt for behavior, and has made fake apologies that are not real apologies. In my opinion, he's no longer part of the discussion. The more important thing is that you have a young crop of Nigerians, many of whom did not have anything to do with the events of 67 to 70, who we are hoping that by educating them on the true history of what has happened, it will allow them to take the reins and begin to bring positive change. NHNDO Kenya, I think, Gowon especially, I have no interest whatsoever in what he has to say.
But that is interesting, because all throughout the war and his persona, he was seen as the gentle Jack.
Yes.
He was seen as the gentleman, the one who was maybe the calmest of all the hotheads that were gathered around the Supreme
That
Military
could have
Council.
been true too.
And knowing fully well too that he, coming from being the son of a priest,
Yes.
that's one. Two, had dealings with a lot of and friendships across the ethnic divides. Had great relationships with Ndibo. In fact, that his wife was supposed to be an Igbo woman, if not for the conflict. It is sad then that he's made himself so irrelevant.
What I sense is your frustration and your disappointment.
That's right.
In somebody who
That's
you
right.
thought would be a
but the more actually
A catalyst.
I read about the story of his leadership during the whole crisis,
Yes.
now I really begin to feel that he was the one who failed Nigeria. Because look at these gentlemen. All these were the same members of the Supreme Military Council who decided that we will not resolve this conflict by force, by sheer use of force.
Let's not show all our hands. I'm going to stop this conversation now because we only have 5 minutes. And what that means is we're going to continue from where we stopped on the next show. And we're going to finish up the Aburi Accord. But I think I want to preempt where we are going. I want to kind of give a peek into where the destination.
Yes.
Could you help me? Where are we trying to get to by discussing this?
What we're trying to do is to make it clear to those who are right-thinking Nigerians and the world that actually there was a solution to the Nigerian crisis in January 4-5 of 1967.
Yes.
And that is one of those missed opportunities
Yes.
as we look at 48 years after the end of the Civil War. So let's not, some of the conversations that have been going on now, if we do not view it with the backdrop of where we started,
Yes.
you got to go, because why but Nigeria has fallen. These leaders have fallen several times. We should have counted. In fact, I think that's what Mazobasi was alluding to, that a lot of all these guys, we should have counted all their loads. We know them.
Yes.
And we shouldn't really expect much from them. So I think this is very informative for me.
My issue on this is, as you can see, this is not something that can be concluded in 1 hour.
Yes.
And I'm glad we're going to continue it on Tuesday. To those people listening, I promise you, this is not a rehash of history. The end of this discussion is to begin to put down practical solutions. Ga-agbapụta ndị Igbo n'aka ndị ji ha n'ala. Ndị Igbo si ọchụ nwa ọkụkọ nwa ada.
That's right.
Nwa ọkụkọ wee nwụọ ọsọ. O ruole mgbe ụmụ Igbo ga-amụta ngwongwo ọsọ, and we are here to be part of that solution. Ndewonu.
Maka na asị na dinta si na enekenti ọba bụ na ofezi ebe. Ya bụ dinta si ya agba atụ.
That's right. So as we end our program, what I would like to have our listeners think about is this. Nigeria started on somewhat of a solid foundation. And at some point, there were some tests to that foundation. And instead of building on the foundation that existed, we decided to redo a foundation. And I think it was in the good book, the question is, if the foundation be destroyed, what has the righteous done? So, as we end our program, thank you for listening. Thank you for your comments on Facebook. Even those that agree and disagree with us, we really love it. We would like to get more into this conversation. Next week, I promise you, on Tuesday, we're going to take the comments, as many as we could, and try to give you our opinions and our conversations with you. It is, join us this Tuesday, 9 to 10 p.m. U.S. Central Time. For a continued conversation. This is Straight Talk to You Radio on WGHC 98.3 FM. Thank you for listening. Catch you for
Ndewono.
Kobo.